Distinguished guest speakers, respected team, PGDM Healthcare Management, faculty, and my dear friends, a very good morning to all of you. On behalf of Raivanda Talks team, I welcome you all to the second session of November series of Talk Ideas. This refreshing morning, we got a unique opportunity to hear Professor Sam Gosling from University of Texas, Austin. He is a social psychologist and author to a coveted book, Snoop, What Your Stuff Says About You. He likes to explore what our most intimate spaces and possessions reveal about us. In his book, he shows not only how we showcase our personality in unexpected and unplanned ways, but also how we create personality in the first place, how we communicate it and interpret the world it is. It is no surprise that our spaces give clues to our personality. But what exactly do we need to know? The question to this answer is not all easy as we imagined. Professor Gosling completed his PhD in social and personality psychology from University of California at Berkeley. Additionally, Dr. Gosling holds a fellowship position at Center for Advanced Studies in Behavioral from Stanford University. Though relatively early, he already won serious acclaim for his research and book, as well as the American Psychological Association Distinguished Scientific Award for early contribution in his career. So let us please welcome him to the
great to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. So I'm going to talk about what I do, and I'm very happy to kind of go off the track and try and make it relevant, as relevant as you see it. So feel free to interrupt me and to ask me questions. I think, I know it sounds a bit medieval, but I think you just like pull it out and push it back in again. That often works. There's something wrong with these air computers there.
Sorry, may I please request Professor Jim to welcome you.
All right. Do you have a technical name?
Sam, actually, we would like to welcome you formally.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just getting on anyway.
You have a sports spirit, so you are too fast, but we have the academic spirit.
Sorry, I wasn't behaving properly. No. Feel free to correct me if I mess up again. I probably will. All right.
This is what we want.
Okay, good. Okay. You can do it. Thank you. All right. Can I talk now? Very good. All right. What I might do is this reach over here or not? Maybe I'll put it like that. Does it get that far? If it doesn't, I can. Okay. Does that have a laser point? Great. All right. Great. Okay, we're ready to go. Say that now. All right, so yes, I'm really interested in the psychology of space and how we relate to the spaces around us. And I think I'd be happy to sort of work together and explore the connections with your own work and what's interesting to you. I do think the work has a number of angles that are interesting from a management perspective. And there are a number of reasons why it is. So the first one is sort of the more obvious thing in terms of understanding what people are like, right? We're in the business, or you guys are partially in the business of being able to understand people, because there's a lot in terms of managing what people do and what's a good role for them and so on. But I think there's a broader angle here where the work we do is also relevant space has a big effect on our psychology, the sorts of spaces we're in, and that affects people's well-being and subsequently their productivity and so on. And I think there's not enough attention is focused on the psychology of space. We were just chatting in the car on the way over here. We think that if we want to manage, we want to give somebody a job, we give them a desk, right? Okay, so you need a desk so you can sit down, and you need a telephone so you can make phone calls, you need a computer so you can do this, and a stapler. But we don't think about the psychological functions and implications of that space. And that ends up being really important. People really care about their spaces. They really care. And they care at such a basic level, they don't notice it. You don't even notice, but it turns out if you mess with people's spaces, then they notice it. So I think if you can use space to understand what people are like, but also make people prosper in that space, they will stay in organizations longer, and they will be more effective in those organizations for various purposes. All right, so I just want to be clear, because I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go through a lot of studies today, and I'm not going to have time to identify who helped me with which study. But these are my collaborators on a lot of the research I've done. So just assume that most of what I'm talking about has been done in collaboration with, and these are my main collaborators on what I'm going to be talking about today. All right, so let's take. Oh, am I going backwards? Oh yeah, let's go back. All right, so I'm interested in people's spaces. So this is a space, one of the spaces we looked at in one of our studies. And you can see, if you look at this, there is evidence here of what the person is like, right? So for example, this is a sensation seeker, right? There's a surfboard, a snowboard, a skateboard. Turns out there's lots of alcohol in the closets here, and so there's evidence of this person's behavior. So I'm very interested in learning about how people leave their traces. And it's particularly good if you look at somewhere like a dorm room. Dorm rooms are great. So these are student dormitory rooms. And what's really great about these, if you think about them, on the first day of semester, these rooms looked identical, right? You would not have been able to tell, absolutely. You wouldn't, if I took the same photo from these different rooms, you wouldn't know which one was which. You'd think it was the two photos of the same room. Yet, look, just a few months into the semester, these rooms are different, and they are different because of the people who live there and the things those people do in those rooms. That is the cause of why these rooms are different, right? And so the work I'm really looking at is what can we understand about people by looking at spaces and looking at the relationship between space and people. Now, I don't know, so most people look at one of those photos and they're horrified by it, but some people are horrified by this one, and some people are horrified by the one on the right. I mean, you pick whichever one you find more horrifying, and I'm not sure what that would be. So those are living spaces. In office spaces too, if you go around office spaces, people express their personalities in those spaces. And I encourage you, when I'm talking to them, I want you to drift off and think about your own space. Think about your own living space, your own working space, your own car, your own music playing. Think about your own things and how those relate to what you like. Now, I understand most of the data that I'm going to be talking about today was collected in the US, and I'm sure the way these things are expressed will be different. So probably, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people in India or people's offices look like that. But I think you have the same psychological processes going on, even if they're manifested differently in these spaces. All right, but of course, your personality can be expressed in all kinds of places, and it is. Right, that it is. So, people, in terms of where they live and what they say, what's on their answer machine message, what they have on their email signature. Do you have a little quote below your email signature? Why? That says something about you. The social life, your writing style, the injuries you get, that says something about you. Your wallet, what's in your wallet, what kind of underwear you have, your journal, what you write in your journal, your passwords, all of these things say something about you. Now, whether they say something about you that might be interesting, we don't know yet, and what they say and whether we know what they say is of course the crucial question that I'm interested in. Now these vary in a couple of different ways. The first way is that some of these things are public, right? Your attractiveness and your websites are very public, your dreams and your passwords and your underwear presumably are more private. And they also vary in the extent to which you have control over them. So you have a lot of control over the things on the right, not so much control over the things on the left. And that ends up being useful in certain situations. If you think, for example, somebody's trying to create a false impression, then you would want to look at those places that they think are public, and do they differ from those places that they think are private. And if there's a discrepancy, that suggests they're trying to create a false impression. All right, so in most of my work, I've looked at three main domains, and that's what I'm going to be talking about mainly today. What I'll talk about some others too, and that's in physical spaces like offices and bedrooms, virtual spaces like websites and Facebook profiles, and oral spaces in terms of the music. And I'm going to be skipping over these studies, but each one of these is a published paper, so if you want more detail, feel free to look at those things. So, why would we even think people would express themselves in their spaces? And we talk about three broad mechanisms by which people express themselves deliberately and inadvertently. The first is what I call identity claims. Identity claims are deliberate statements we make to others about ourselves, about our attitudes, our values, our goals, what's important to us. And you see these everywhere, right? In the t-shirts people wear, as they have stuff on their car. We're constantly, we play music and roll down the window so everybody can hear it. We're trying to send signals to others all the time. Now that doesn't mean that these signals are disingenuous. In fact, I think most of the time they're honest. There's a lot of work done in self-verification theory by Bill Swan and others that shows that people in fact want to be known, and not only that, they're happier, they're healthier, and they're more productive when they can bring others to see them as they see themselves. Whether they're seeing themselves positively or negatively, they want to be seen as they see themselves. They want to be seen authentically. And so I think identity claims are essentially how we do that. And so in office space, so this is a classic identity. Right here are all my, look where the person sits here, and they look this way, and these are behind them. So they're not looking at these things, right? This is what, you come into the office, and you see the person, and here are all the great awards and certificates and qualifications I have. So it's saying, look, I'm proud of this, and this is who I am. Again, not disingenuous. It's very reasonable behavior, but it's saying, this is who I am. All right, yeah. So in dorm rooms too. So most of my early studies were looking at people's dormitory rooms or bedrooms or homes or those sorts of things. So this was a student's dorm room, right? Doors are a great place to see what people are like, right? Because like this isn't for the person, right? The person is the other side of the door. They're not looking at that stuff. It's you get to the door, and before you've even crossed over the threshold, you say, okay, I know this door, I already know something about this person. I haven't even gone into the room yet. And you know something about this person because they're telling you. They want you to know. Now, so that was the first thing, identity claims, deliberate statements we make, things we do to our environments to tell people what we're like. Another way we deliberately affect our environment is through what I call thought and feeling regulators. So a lot of the things we do to our space are done specifically in the service of making ourselves feel a certain way or think about certain things. So the obvious example here being music, right? Why do we listen to music? Why do so many people listen to music? What are they doing? Well, they're regulating their emotions. They're making them think about something. Think about when you listen to music and which music you listen to. Right? In some situations, you'll listen, like if you had a really stressful day at work, you'll be listening to kind of relaxing music, trying to calm down. But if you're going to go out for a wild night on the town, listen to something else to try and get yourself going up. So we listen, we affect our psychology by changing the environment. And it's something that I think is so natural to us that we don't even notice we're doing it. We really don't notice it, but we are doing it. Now, one of the ways that people do this is the things they put in their space too. And so this, pushing the wrong button, I'm sorry. So this here, right? So this like little photos of loved ones and so on. This is what some researchers have called social snaps. So social snaps are these ideas. So like, if you're hungry, you had breakfast and it's kind of, you're getting hungry. Oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to have some peanuts just to kind of get a snack and some peanuts and maybe until lunchtime or whatever. Well, the same thing goes emotionally. You're there, and in this case, you're missing your little baby. So you're working, and you're missing your baby, and you kind of, oh, there's my baby. Okay, now you go back to work again, and you feel okay. And these things are very important. So these functions are, I think, very important to people's ability to function effectively in their workplaces. And so here you see, so here are two offices. A lot of these photos aren't very good because when I go to give talks, I say, I take pictures so I can talk about it. So these are two offices at a university, and so here is an extrovert's and an introvert's office. So spot the extrovert. One thing we know about extroverts is they're drawn to people. They love people. They like music with voices in it. They try to provoke interactions. They're energized by interactions. So here we have, look, so here's an extrovert. Look, there's people. No more space. Oh, right, people. And then you have the introverts of it. So there's a tree there. That's maybe the closest you get. There's a duck over there, right? But people, and if you look at these, this is all immediate. Hey, excitement! Get me going. That one is just calm down. It's like down regulate. So you just get a sense looking at these that people are changing their environment to try and affect their psychology. So that was thought and feeling regulators. Now, the next domain I talk about, so those are both things we deliberately do, right? Identity claims and thought and feeling regulators are things we deliberately do to our spaces to make ourselves feel a certain way. Another way we leave clues about ourselves is inadvertently. So we engage in lots of activities. We're always doing stuff. A subset of those activities, not all of them, but a subset of those activities leave a material trace in their wake. They leave residue. So I call this behavioral residue. Books, great example of residue. There's evidence of what this person has read, but far more than that. How are they organized? What, if you open up the books, have they been marked? Are there crumbs in the spine from when the person was eating and reading at the same time? There's all sorts of evidence here. I mean, these are the sorts of things, right, that Sherlock Holmes is looking for, right? He's looking for clues to behaviors. And so it's the same sort of thing. This is one of the rooms we looked at in one of our studies, right? This is behavioral residue, right? This is residue of the person not tidying up, right? And so it is like this because of things this person did, or in this case, didn't do. It reflects those things. So the idea here is by looking at these clues, we can reason backwards to what this person's like. So here we go. In fact, there is you see there's the office you saw before. There's the introvert sitting quietly at the desk. But now I'm illustrating residue, right? Look at this. Look how delighted this person is. Like clear desk. You can see how all the pencils are in the pencil holder. But this my office looks more like this. But these places are different because of behaviours these different people engage in. All right, so I'm going to tell you about some of the research this is based on now, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time just explaining the design of this first study, because all the other studies have the same design, although they're in different contexts. So it's good. Okay, so what I did was I wanted to say, what can ordinary people learn about going to people's spaces? If you go into someone's space, you form impressions. Are those impressions accurate? So I sent teams of researchers my assistants, I just sent them into people's spaces and said, tell me what you think this person is like. So here they are in one of the rooms, and they're just writing down, they're filling out a personality questionnaire for what they think the person's like. They've never even seen the person. They know nothing about the person other than what they can get from snooping around this person's place. And they are making ratings in terms of the big 5 personality dimensions. So just So for my own interest, how many people have heard of the big 5 personality dimensions? Anybody here? A few people? Okay, yeah. So those of you who've heard of them, so this is the most widely used and most widely accepted system for understanding personality now. Personality traits, I should say, okay? So it's sort of, who's heard of the MBTI, of the Myers-Briggs? Well, that's very refreshing to hear that more people have heard of the big 5 and not the Myers-Briggs. Because the Myers-Briggs is far more popular, but it's nonsense. There's nothing to it. But it's very widely used. All right. So this is, so this is the big 5. So let me say a few things about it, because I'm going to be presenting all of my findings in terms of the big 5. So you can think of this as the ocean model, as a model you remember it. And so the idea is you're not one of these 5, right? Everybody has a score on all 5 dimensions. Okay, so you're not open or conscientious. Everybody is somewhere on this dimension. It's somewhere along this openness dimension, somewhere along the conscientious, somewhere etc. So you have 5 scores. These are bipolar, so you can be high or low in each of these things. And also they're very broad. Obviously, if they're saying that most of the variants in personality can be captured by these things, these are very, very broad dimensions. And so what are the big 5? So the first one is openness. So openness, and I have an icon to help you remember each of them. So my icon for openness is Leonardo, of course. So the quintessential Renaissance man. He was a biologist, a philosopher, an artist, an inventor, a politician. So he had many different interests. Was very creative, and so on. So this is really one way to think about if you're high or low on openness. And I should say, being high, neither one on any of these dimensions, neither one is intrinsically better. It's not better to be high, it's not better to be low. What's important is the fit with the personality and the context. So that's what's important. Now, okay, so a very quick way to think, are you high or low on openness? So you go to a restaurant and you open up the menu and you think, oh, I've never seen that before, I have no idea what it is. I'll have it, please. Then you're high on openness, that's you. If you go to the restaurant and they say, here's the menu, and you say, so I don't need the menu, because I know what I'm going to have what I always have. Then you're probably low on openness. All right, so my next, I don't know if you'll have heard of all of these characters. My next icon is Robocop, who, as you will remember, was half man, half machine, all cop. And so he's this sort of character. So this is frontal lobe function. Essentially, this is things like planning, thinking before you act, trying to control your impulses, and so on. So this is the one dimension that across occupations is most predictive. So these people, who are task-oriented, they do stuff, they're responsible, they're dependable. These are the people that, this is the most consistently predictive dimension. All right, extraversion, we all know that. Essentially, people are drawn towards people. My icon for this is Beverly Hills Cop, or any character played by Eddie Murphy, as far as I can think. So these are outgoing people. They like to engage with others, versus people who are introverts, who prefer to spend, who are fine, like social interaction time. My icon for agreeableness was Mother Teresa, but then somebody told me she was domineering. So anyway, so I have this other, this is Mr. Rogers, who you may or may not know. He's an American TV character who was famously nice. He was so nice. Apparently there's a story where he once had his car was stolen, and there was a story about his car was stolen, and the next day his car was returned with a note saying, if we'd known it was your car, we wouldn't have stolen it. We're sorry. So that's pretty nice to get people to return their car, which is so nice. So these are people who are kind, warm, sympathetic, they're nurturing. And then neuroticism, fine, that's really about, it's not a very good term, it's a kind of pejorative term, but that's not what it really means. People who are it's people who are more prone to anxiety, but essentially they're more sensitive to what can go wrong in the world, threats, what might not work. So of course my icon for this is Woody Allen. All right, so these are the 5 dimensions. So we'll come back to those in a second, but I'm going to be giving, so essentially the judges are going around somebody's space saying, which of these things can I pick up from somebody's space? And then what I did was I sent another team of judges around where they were recording all of the objects in somebody's space. What's there? Is there trash? Is it full? Is it empty? Is there books? Are they diverse? Or all kinds of things. Just the objects in the space. And then I also, and here you see them going around office spaces, just recording all of the things. And then what I did was I went back. Then we need to say, well, are these people correct? How can we tell if they're correct? So we gave the occupants themselves questionnaires, and we got friends of the occupants to tell us what the occupant was like as well. Because we all know self-report, there's a lot of problems with self-reports. So they're good for something, but often we're deluded about ourselves, or we just have poor memory, or we're trying to create a good impression. So if you can combine self-reports, what the person says about themselves, with what others say about them, then you have a good idea of what that person's like. So here are the rooms I showed you earlier. Look at the rooms just so you kind of get back in the flow of what spaces look like. Now, so think about it. If you look at people's rooms, which of these personality traits, which of the big 5 personality traits, do you think you can judge accurately? Which could you judge accurately? So there they are again. We're going to have a vote. Really? We're going to have a vote. I'm going to ask you to vote for one thing. Right? And the question is, if you snoop around somebody's living space, which traits can you most accurately judge? Right, we're going to have a vote. We're going to have a hand vote. All right, okay. So first of all, who is not going to vote? Okay, so everybody's going to, that's good to know. All right. Okay, so who thinks you can most accurately judge openness? All right, that's a lot. That is 40% of you. Who thinks conscientiousness? That is also a lot. That's 40% of you. All right, who thinks extraversion? All right, you meant to be voting for one thing here, but okay. That's also 40% of you. We're already around. Agreeableness? All right, that's 1% of you. All right. Neuroticism? All right, that is 5% of you. All right, well, that's interesting. Yeah. What I thought when I did this study, as most of you did, is conscientiousness would be the one that shows up most clearly in people's face, and indeed it does. You can learn a lot about somebody's conscientiousness from snooping around their space, but you can judge even more accurately, you can judge openness. That's the one that really comes through looking around people's spaces. So we also did a study not only of people's living spaces, but their office spaces. Here are some of the cubicles we look like. And you can see, essentially, they're like those dorm rooms in the sense that we'll essentially have the same space to work with, yet they do very different things with those spaces. We also looked at other contexts. We have seen people's physical space, and we thought, well, what about these spaces where people have more control over them? Because you have kind of less control over your physical space, because you don't know, like if you have something lying out, you don't know if that's really behavioral residue or you're putting that to show off. So we wanted to have a domain where you really control everything in that domain. It's there because you put it there deliberately. Nothing kind of got there accidentally. And that's a good way of looking at identity plans. So we looked at people's personal websites. Now, most of you here probably never saw a person. We're talking about ancient history here. This is before Facebook, if you can even conceive of a time before Facebook. People really created personal websites, but they were essentially trying to do the same thing as Facebook. They were saying, hey everyone, this is me, this is who I am. And so they were expressing themselves in this space, which underlines the need to express oneself. Just to give you an idea, this is what they used to look like. There's quite a lot of variety here. Art, thought, self. Conscientiousness, Carol's page. There is these compendiums of knowledge. Openness. So and there's lots of information on these things. Look, this person that you see their movie preferences. In case you're interested, there's that person's schedule. You might want to know what classes they're taking. And there's some poetry. Here's some more things. So there's lots of information. This person has kindly given you their mood diary. They're feeling fruity and low energy and burned. Their cat pictures you might care about. But there's even a picture of somebody's office. So you're at the website, you're getting a picture of their office. Looks like a really interesting person to hang out with, doesn't it? And then look at this here. So look, these are identity claims, right? Look, identity claims, right? This is saying, you know, this is the gay Hispanic frat boy, but that essentially, that's what the person's saying here. This is who I am. Whoa. So what can we judge about people from looking at those things like that? And unlike in the study of spaces, we normally cover up people's faces. But what we did here, we couldn't cover them up. So I thought people would just put like, you know, flattering photos of them, but that was one of the photos. So it was disgusting. Anyway, all right. So then, of course, Facebook came along, and Facebook has very relevant because that really is so widespread, and people do use it as a means of interacting. In fact, it is true that in LinkedIn, Facebook, this is often your first point of contact with somebody. And the question is, what can you learn about somebody from their Facebook profile? Can you really learn what they're like? So in this study, we not only were looking at what they're like, we also looked at their ideal selves and see if strangers look at people's Facebook, right? If they look at their Facebook account and compare that with a real person, are you getting an accurate impression? So in this study, we also looked at idealized selves. So here we're going to vote again. So if you look at somebody's Facebook, here are your two options, A or B. Do you think you learn more about what they're really like? That's option A. Or do you learn more about what they'd ideally like to be like? Option B. All right. So who thinks it's option A? 0% of you. Who thinks it's option B? You guys are all wrong. You learn much more about what this person's like. So by a long shot. So if you look around, so some strangers look at their website, and that corresponds much more strongly with how the person really sees themselves and how their friends see them than their ideal self. And it's one of those findings that when you begin to look at it and think about what would really be required to convey an ideal self, it makes sense. We can talk about it later if you want. Oh yeah, so there might be other ways you can learn about people. This is a great study done by a colleague, Calvary Arconi, and what he did here was he just went to, this is not my study actually, this is his work, I want to be very clear about that. And what he did was he just went to blogs and he just had a word count analysis go through and say who uses which words more. And then he gave them a really good personality measure and say, do different personalities use different words? And the answer is yes, they talk about different stuff, and it's sort of consistent with what we think about. Look, here's the neurotic person. This is the words they tend to use. As I told you, they're focusing on what can go wrong in the world. Look at the words they use. Awful, worse, depressing, terrible, stressful, horrible, right? So people high in neuroticism tend to use these words more than people low in neuroticism. Whereas you look at the extroverts, right, these are the people who go out, they're good time people, they're talking about bars, drinks, restaurants, dancing, drinking, shots, girls, you know, Miami, you know, crazy, right? So you can get a sense of what these people are like. They're just talking about different stuff. Openness, right? Openness is about breadth and sort of thinking. These guys are talking folk, humans, poets, art, culture, poetry, universe. So these guys are really talking about different things. Agreeableness, so these are the Mr. Rogers, right? These are the people who have their car returned to them because they're so nice. Wonderful. Together. Morning. Spring porn, that's a negative correlation, so again, it's not a positive. They talk less about pornography than others. So beautiful, share, etc. And in fact, my best finding, the one I like most of the whole paper, is this correlation here for conscientiousness, completed. If anything sums up conscientiousness, it's that word. They have a task and they've done it. I've completed my task. Well, they feel good about it. That's what conscientiousness really gets to the heart of it. What about people's music preferences? Can you learn about people from their music preferences? So we looked at this study. We asked people, we said, tell us about your all-time top 10 songs. And these are real top 10s from our study. I didn't put this up to be funny. Somebody's all-time favorite song really was Oops, I Did It Again. So what we did, we just recorded these songs. We had people listen to them. They did nothing more than listen to these songs and try to guess what the people are like? Can you judge people just from hearing their music? When people are getting to know each other, they talk about music a lot. What about just knowing who people to talk to, where they go? This is a study using the electronically activated recorder known as the ear. And so this is a little device people wear, and they wear it for multiple days, and every 12 minutes it comes on, this microphone comes on for 30 seconds and just records whatever's going on. So if you just listen to those recordings, these little snippets of the person's life, can you tell what the person's like? Again, same design as all the other studies. We have one team of judges just judging people on the basis of the snippets, comparing that with what the person's really like. What about other ways we express ourselves? Our clothing. Can you learn much about people's clothing? From people from their clothing. So we did a study here where people came in, they didn't know what the study was about. We said stand there and go click, take their photo, and then we take personality assessments, and then we show people the photos and compare people who've only seen the photos with what the person's like. Okay, so I've been talking about a lot of studies, and I've given you a lot of findings, so let me do that now. So here's what the findings are going to look like. So these are all the studies I just told you about. Physical appearance, social behavior is the ear study with the microphone, music, what people's office looks like, their bedroom, their website, Facebook, and then these are the big five. Okay, and so what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to show you about a very complicated kind of analysis which I invented. It's called a blob analysis, which means the bigger the blob, the stronger the correlation, the more accuracy there is. Alright, so you can now think if you're right or not. And so these are where people are accurate. So you'll notice a few things, right? You'll notice, for example, that some traits are generally more easily judged than others. So openness, easily judged, generally, not in all domains. And some domains generally offer more information than others. Websites offer a lot. But you'll also notice a thing where some traits get particularly strongly expressed in some domains. So, people say, where should I look to learn about people? Depends what you want to know. If you want to learn about their extraversion, then going to their Facebook is a pretty good way of learning that. But if you want to learn about something else, you look at a different domain. So it's different parts of our personality are revealed in different places. I want to shift now slightly to talk about the design of spaces. So we talk about what you learn if you go into people's spaces. But this is people, very few things. People have offices, they might have their office or their living room or something like that, and they go into it and they decorate it. But what if we could take a step back and from scratch think about the psychology of people and design spaces that are based on that before we've even started building anything? And so for this I've started working with this architect, Christopher Travis. I wrote about him in my book quite a lot. And I think he's doing very innovative stuff. So he builds houses for people. And most people when you, architects who want to say get the information from clients, they're having a house built. They say, okay, what do you want, client? And I said, well, I want 2 bathrooms, I want windows like this, and floors like this, and so on. And the question is, and Travis says this is absolute nonsense because not only do people not know what they want in their space, even worse than that, they think they know what they want in their space. And they are wrong. They're absolutely wrong about that. So, and so what he does is he doesn't say, what do you want in your home? He starts off with this very extensive psychological interview where he says to people, all right, tell me about the times in your life when you felt protected. Tell me about the times in your life when you felt loved, when you felt provided for, when you felt happy. And then he says he works from that basis to try and construct features of a space that will evoke those sensations. And that's what's important, right? If you think, what is the difference between a house and a home? Right? The difference is the psychological attributes. That's what makes those things different, not just a building. And the same thing, can apply to workspaces too. And just to show you how central this sort of psychology is to the process, even when he's developed the plans, you'll see he keeps the psychology next to it. Now you might not be able to read this, but it says this is the sleeping room, and it says tranquility heaven. This is the I don't know what a Sarah spike model is. rejuvenation of spirit. So even on the building plans, on the building side, the psychological things are there. Master bathroom, private and personal. So that the psychology is right front and center the whole time. Here's another plan. This master bedroom, this is from a different house. It says, in the master bedroom it says, privacy, passion, reflection. But he's saying, this is what I want this space to be. And he's designing it accordingly. So we were interested in saying, oh, right, so he's used this, and that's all very well. He's used this for a client. Can we make a sort of generalized idea of what are the sorts of things people want to evoke in their different spaces? What are the different dimensions people want to evoke? So we know, and so we've done studies based on this now. So we know, for example, that when people, everybody wants their hallway or the entryway to evoke welcoming. So that's very common. But in other spaces, it's different. So what do people want to evoke in their kitchen? Some people want to evoke a sense of family, others a sense of abundance, others a sense of productivity, others a sense of organization. So some of these things vary across spaces. So we did this study where we just say, all right, imagine your house. What emotions or feelings or ambiances do you want to evoke into different spaces? And so in the sense of family, we say, where do you want to evoke a sense of family? Participants in this study said, well, mainly in the living room, the dining room, and kind of the kitchen. That's really where we want people, where we want ourselves and others to be thinking about family. But if you ask about something else, you ask about something like relaxation, that's different. They also want to feel relaxed in the living room, but then also instead of that, in the master bedroom, the bathroom, the guest bedroom, the guest bathroom. So these things vary. And I think this is one of the ways that we regulate our emotions. We regulate our emotions, and I don't think we notice we're doing it. We just feel, oh, and you just kind of want to, your body wants to feel slightly differently, and you kind of unconsciously move to a different area. You're not even aware you're doing it, but at some point you sort of find yourself in the kitchen. You were in the living room, now you're in the kitchen. Now, of course, this applies to all kinds of spaces. So, you guys, you came in today. How did you decide where to sit? You are sitting somewhere, right? You decided where to sit. Was that random? No. But that was a rhetorical question. The answer is no, it wasn't random. That says something about you, where you decide to sit. So who would say they generally sit in the same general area for most of their classes? Raise your hand if you do that. All right. Are you assigned to seats? Okay. So what are we learning about? So we've done a lot. So I teach big classes, and I get all the students to write down their seat numbers, and then I can look. This is a big class I teach, about 540 students in that. And what I do is every time they write down the seat number, I say, all right, how do people vary personality from where they sit? And I'll just tell you about a couple of findings, but I don't have time to go through it all. But one of the things is, for example, like people, like things like you'd expect. Where do the conscientious people sit? Front, right? So, they want to be involved and make sure they don't miss anything. What about some other findings? I'm not going to go, there's so many interesting findings, but I don't want to go through them all now. What about people who are neurotic? Where do they sit? They sit near the edges, right? And near the exits. They want to be able to get out of there if something goes wrong. Right? They're always thinking about what might go wrong. Even if they're not really aware of it, they just feel more comfortable not to feel like trapped with what they're getting told. But one of the most interesting findings to emerge from this research was not just that we locate ourselves with reference to physical features of the space, but we locate ourselves with reference to other people too. We found over the course of the semester, you begin to see people, like-minded people, grouping together. So you begin to see the people with similar levels of religiosity grouping together, similar levels of political orientation grouping together. And I don't think they're doing this. If you ask them, why did you sit there? They'd say no reason. And I don't think they're thinking, oh, there's another conservative person, I'm going to go sit next to them. They're just thinking, oh, it's just that because there are other people who are kind of like them, that just feels more kind of welcoming and comfortable, and so they unconsciously go over there. But we do this all the time, right? You just think when you go, you say, you're going to go out to a cafe, you don't randomly go to a cafe, you think, do you go to like Starbucks or the kind of independent place or whatever it is, right? You decide where to go. And probably you've all had this experience. I travel a lot, and you probably probably do too. You probably all have this experience. You go to a new town or a new area of town, you think, oh, I'm going to this place, and you open the door and you think, these are not my people. Yeah, I'm going to, or you think, hey, these are my people. Great, and you go in. And so a lot of us, we want to be around like-minded people. And so we did a study looking, we said, well, can we learn about a space just by looking at the people who go there a lot? So you guys may or may not remember there's a website, it used to be quite popular, that's now called Foursquare. And what Foursquare was, it's a place where people go somewhere and they'd check in on their phone. They'd say, I'm now at Starbucks, or I'm now here. And so they would have a profile. So you could look at a person's profile and that would tell you what the, that you could see all the places the person went to. But you could also go to a place and see who are the people who go there a lot. So in this study what we did was we took all the people, we just took like 25 or however many that is, of profile pictures of the people who go to a certain location. And we said, okay, these people go to some location. We're not going to tell you anything more about the location other than all these people go to it. You don't even know what city it's in or anything like that. What do you think this place is like? The people who have profile pictures like that, what do you think it is? And you'll see, look, some of these, this doesn't even have a picture of a person, it's a picture of their dog. You know, and there's a, like, where is there? Somewhere like this, a cartoon character, right? So often it's not even the person. And the question is, you know, can we judge what these places are like just based on these photos? And they're judging things about kind of the vibe, the ambiance, you might say, whether it's artsy, bohemian, conservative, shady, douchey, or like what could you do there, and what's the kinds of people. So they're making judgments about these sorts of things. Then, of course, then what I did, of course, I send my team to those places and say, okay, what is this place really like? And then we can say, all right, if somebody's just looked at that group of people, can they guess what the place is really like? And the answer is essentially yes. They're very easy with correlation coefficients, we don't need to worry about them, but stars mean statistically significant, so generally good. So this is saying that people can judge what a place is like just by looking at the photos of the people who go to that place, which tells you something about how we aggregate. Now, of course, we do that at a broader level too. So Bill Bishop wrote this interesting book in sort of the context of the US election, saying, well, look, people tend to aggregate around like-minded people. So we become more and more divided. So you know, that's why nobody can understand the other political parties, because everybody they know agrees with them. So they think, I just don't understand how there's such division. But that's because they put themselves in the middle of people who think the same way. They move to group. So people aggregate. So we did a study. We actually have data from all over the world. I'm sure we have a lot of data on India too. But this is, I'm just going to talk about the data we have from the States. So is it true that people segregate themselves in terms of geographically on personality? Well, you know, we certainly have sort of stereotypes, right, about people from different areas, right? We all know, think of the neurotic East Coast New Yorkers like Woody Allen, and then we think of the laid-back Californians like the dude from Big Lebowski. And the question is it true? Are these geographic stereotypes true? Is it true that you have the neurotic East Coasters and the laid-back Californians? Yes, it is true. So we have a very big sample of internet data we've collected for years and years, and we just looked at them and said, all right, let's map their levels of neuroticism by region. And the darker the red, the higher they are on neuroticism. Now, once you have this regional data, then it's very powerful, because then you can map it to all kinds of other forms of data. So, for example, that is the map of neuroticism I just showed you. That's the map of cancer-related deaths. And if you correlate those across states, it's an enormously strong correlation. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying cancer causes neuroticism. And I'm not saying neuroticism causes cancer. The rate of correlation is not equal causation. But they are related. And we just published a paper recently, it's not in this talk, in Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, where we characterize, in this case we're doing the US, we're doing some other countries too, places in terms of their psychological profile. And because a lot of people, like in economics, we're interested in how do we, most places are characterized, for example, in terms of things like health, like, you know, they talk about the stroke belt, that people get strokes in the US, or in terms of economic indicators, or in terms of health indicators, or in terms of social behavior indicators, entrepreneurship, for example. We just published a paper on the geographic correlates of entrepreneurship. And we think of these things, well, oh, it's health, behavior, economics, but wait a minute, what makes something for like entrepreneurship high? Well, it's a lot of entrepreneurs starting businesses. That's what it is. It's individuals. What is it that makes somewhere unhealthy? A lot of individuals engaging in unhealthy behavior. And those behaviors are personality. So the whole thrust of this area of work is saying, if we can look at their personalities, we can begin to understand what's really the driving force behind these geographic aggregate trends. This, in case you're interested, this is openness, which is quite relevant to innovation and entrepreneurship. And as you'd expect, you see high openness down the coast. All right, so I just want to take a step back and go back and think about, well, why is it that these sorts of living spaces are so revealing? Well, I actually, I meant to put an Indian stamp up there, but I haven't done it. But and one of the ways of thinking about this is thinking, and one of the reasons I think is that one of the reasons that places are particularly revealing is because personality isn't, well, one reason is in our spaces it captures, if I interview you, you can really hold it together. You can focus for an hour and give me the impression you want to. You can say, yes, I'm very conscientious, I'm very interested in these things. You just do that, right? You can hold it, all you have to do is focus for an hour. But your space, can you really live in your space in a way that gives a false impression? In a space, it takes repeated behavior, so it's a very big collection of repeated behaviors pattern. That's one reason. The other reason is it's very hard to fake, because personality is not only how we behave, it's how we perceive the world. So, all right, I'm going to ask, I asked this question in my talk yesterday. Okay, so I want people to be honest here. Who carries in their wallet or their bag or in their spare stamps? Stamps, please. Raise your hand, put your hand up high, don't be ashamed. All right, everybody look around. Right, okay. Who does not carry spare stamps? Put your hands up high. All right, everybody look around, see who does not. All right, okay. The truth is, I don't care who carries stamps. But what is always interesting is the reactions of the people with their hands down. Right? So people who don't carry spare stamps, and I say who does, and they see people, they think, what? I've never even thought of carrying spare stamps. Why would I do that? Are you out of your minds? And then the people who do carry spare stamps, they see all these people who don't think, well, what happens when you need to mail a letter? You know, and the idea is that for them, what you do seems like the self-evident thing to do. It seems like the obvious thing to do. And so it's very difficult to fake things because it's difficult to really fake those differences in perception. All right, that is me. I'm done. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. If you, on the off chance you want to read more about the stuff, that's my book, but I'm not here to hold my book, I'm here to talk to you. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Do we do questions here? Is that what we do? Yes. All right, come on. Yes?
How can you judge a person with dual personality?
How can I what?
How can you judge a person with dual personality?
Dual personality?
Yeah, dual personality.
Well, I think, the answer is, I don't know, because I haven't done research on people with multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder. I haven't done that, but I expect that it would depend, right? Because if you're really being serious, right, the way NPD cases show up, it's not like they consistently have one personality. They can split between one and go back and forth between them for small segments. And so it's not. I don't know if they would really be in one personality for long enough and consistently enough to really leave a trace. But there's no reason why, if they did do that, you would see evidence of both personalities. So you might see that. I mean, probably people who have genuinely MPD, multiple personalities, they are typically, often they struggle, they're kind of disturbed. So you would see evidence for that in addition. Many of the mental disorders, you see that. Especially neuroticism is common across many of those. Yes?
A person can be an extrovert at some point of time in his life. The same person can be can show different personality traits while facing different situations. Now,
yes and no, yeah.
Then it is more about, on a scale of 10, maybe I am assertive on certain points, I am an extrovert
Yeah.
on certain points, I am open to certain experiences, but very restricted to some certain amount of some certain things. So how can you judge a person based, totally on the fact that this person is an agreeable person or this person is an extrovert? A person might be, a little extrovert, a little this thing, other.
Well, they are. So as I said, everybody has scores in all 5 dimensions. So you're not extroverted or agreeable. You will have a score on extroversion, a score on agreeableness. You'll have a profile across the 5 dimensions. And I understand where you're coming from, but I don't buy your. I mean, the data just don't support your assertion. I know we all feel, if you say to people, how extroverted are you? Everybody will say, well, it depends. Sometimes, I'm outgoing, sometimes I'm not. That's not what we mean by extroversion, right? We mean people who are, on average, more extroverted. Everybody talks more at a party than they do when studying in the library. Everybody does that. But at both the library and at the party, the extrovert talks more than the introvert. So it's just empirically not true. I know we have that sense. Now there is a lot of variation. Some of the best work on this is done by Will Fleeson. And he's done some work in specific on extroversion. What he does is he gives people a little beeper. He says, all right, how extroverted are you being right now? They say that. How extroverted are you feeling right now? And so if the situation completely determined our personality, then you'd see huge variation. And in fact, you do. So initially, when you look at the data, you think you have support for that, the argument you're making. So if you look at a single person's distribution of extroversion, and over time, it's like you'll see exactly what you say. Sometimes they're being extroverted, sometimes they're being introverted, and they're all over the place. You think, oh well, then in that case, personality doesn't exist because it just depends on the situation. However, if you take that one person and you take their average, right, and over say a week, and then you take their average, a month later, over a week, right, and you do that for lots of people, and you plot 1 week versus the next week, the correlation between their average is almost perfect. So the answer is it's both. We all vary a lot around a very stable mean. Now, having said that, there is normative change over time. So we just published a paper, in fact, looking across culturally, 62 different countries, including India, where we say, looking at patterns of personality change. So even though, right, some people are more conscientious than others, right, on average there are normative changes, such as, for example, that at age 10, people say start out here, and then through teenage years they plummet. And anyone who's seen a teenager's room knows that they're not conscious. They plummet, and then now this is what varies, and this is what the paper's about. But around the age of, say, 18, 19, 20, they begin to get more extroverted, and then they get conscientious, and they continue to get more and more conscientious through the lifespan as they engage in adult life tasks, like getting a job, like starting a business, like having a family, like having kids. Those things, you can no longer be irresponsible if your kid's waiting to be picked up from school or whatever it is. You have to be. And so that's what, in fact, this paper which is published looks at that. It says, when you see the inflections, when you see the changes in conscientiousness, does this happen is it just like a biological trigger, like some people have said, or is it precipitated, is it marked by the transition into life tasks? And when you see people have these earlier life tasks, so in fact, I think India may be the average youngest age, like I think on average in India people get married at 22, whereas in Sweden people on average get married at 32, 10 years later. And as a result, you see the conscientiousness go up sooner in India than you do in Sweden. So, but having said that, there are these average changes. Of course, there's this curve, but there are people, above and below that point all the time. There's still variation. So you have change in the sense that we're all changing our personality, but people more or less maintain their relative standing. But of course, some people don't. Some people go. But and I think, I think it is important. Like there are lots of introverts, right, who know. They say, I know that in order to be effective in business and in my work life and so on, I have to behave in an extroverted way. They say, I need to meet people, I need to network, and I'm just going to suck it up and do it. I'm going to come. And I think so you can, if you look at the behaviors during the interaction, it can be difficult to tell an introvert from an extrovert, because introverts, in the service of being conscientious, will make themselves go through those things. But a true biological introvert will never feel the same. So if you have a party, there's a party, I say, okay, everyone, in fact, there's going to be a party later. There's going to be a party. How do you feel, right? If you are a true extrovert, you think, great, party, and then you come, and after you talk to me, and after the party, you're, wow, that was fun, I'm raring to go. If you are an introvert, after the party, you are exhausted from all of that. In fact, introverts will often rush off and then go and like sit in bathrooms, kind of like just recover from all of that stimulation. And those things, those sort of the biological differences in arousal levels are hard to really change. Yes.
Do you find a correlation when you study public spaces of people in private? Public and private space. Let's say if you study someone's office, you study someone's home, and assuming the home is a place that the person considers as very private.
Yeah.
Because I would assume that in a public space, you also want to kind of send more of a message.
Yeah.
So is there a correlation that you find related?
There's something of a correlation. So I've never actually done that study. I would love to do that exact study. I've been around a lot of spaces, so I see those things, and I think there are a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, we perceive, I think a lot of us have that sensation, think, well, my office is like this, and my home's like this, and I think we are, yes, they are different, but the difference between those places is not always as different as the differences between people. But you are right, and they often are different, and in a sense, they reflect the sorts of differences that you were talking about, that we do, like in our work role, we do behave, essentially we have a sort of temporary personality that is slightly different. It is more responsible, it is more professional, it is, or it may be more disorganized. So I think we are persistently and consistently different across those situations, and to the extent we are, those would be reflected in differences.
Also possibly you have different, what do you say, self-images in each of the two places.
Right, you may well do that. Well, the closest thing I got to studying this empirically was when our own psychology department, we were moving buildings. And so I had one team of people go into everybody's offices and say, what do you think this person's like? They didn't know them. And then, like 2 years later, or a year later, we moved to a new building. And then then they moved into the new office, and I sent a completely different team into those offices and said, what do you think this person's like? And then I correlated one set of offices with the view. So the only thing in common in those sets of data was the occupant, right? The judges were different, the office space was different. The only thing that linked them was the occupant of those two different office spaces when they moved from their old office to their new office. And what we found was very strong correlations between those cases. And I think actually they'd probably get stronger if you gave it more time. Because those of you who moved offices, we all know what it's like where you think, all right, I'm going to be that organized person. That is who I'm going to be. You beautifully alphabetize your books and everything like that. But if that's not who you are, you can't keep it up. you know, I did that. I remember I alphabetized my whole music collection once. I think I'm going to be organized. And it was beautiful. My collection was beautifully organized, you know, for one day. Because, you know, I just can't live that life. It's not who I am. Yes?
What do you think are the reasons for correlation between geographical locations and personality traits?
I think there are multiple reasons going on. So I think, I think first of all, there are founder effects. So by that, different people, like if you think about who went to these places. So for example, if you look at the Midwest United States, that was settled by a very different group of people, what they call the Midwest, which is essentially the central part, you know, that was settled by people who essentially conservative religious people trying to get away from persecution for their religion. So they occupied a certain area. So they found that they were there. Whereas the people who went out west, people were striking out for new adventures and new lives and seeking their fortune and going things. So they're there, and also the coasts are where the immigrants first arrived. So you have different founders. So those set up different things. But then once you have those things, they kind of perpetuate. So you have these founder effects, but you have other effects too. So for example, like if you are gay and live in the middle of Kansas, you get out of there. You do not stay there. That is no place to be, living in the middle of Kansas. You go to New York, you go to San Francisco, you get out to the. So there's part of it is selection effects where they there's this, you know, reaches some kind of tipping point where you have this sort of runaway effect. But also there's other effects too. So for example, if you are intrinsically, if you're biologically not open to experiences, but you live in New York City, you see cultural variation, you see artistic stuff, you're exposed to many different ideas. So although you have this sort of biological mean point, you're probably, if you live in New York, if this is your point and this is your option, you probably are as high as you could be within that range. So I think there are multiple, and if you think about different spaces, they afford and promote different behaviors. So, like they culturally and like if you live on a beach versus living on mountains, versus living in a desert area, versus living in a central urban location, those just provide different opportunities for the kinds of things you can do and the sorts of experiences you have. So I think that's one of the reasons. I don't know if you guys cover, Richard Florida talks a lot about this, the creative class, and how, they're very important in terms of becoming these centers for people who are generating sort of the new economy, essentially, the Silicon Valleys and places. Like here, probably right here, if you are some, entrepreneur in social media, I don't know where would be the place, like Bangalore or something. I don't know where it would be. It's probably somewhere in India, I don't know where you would go, right? Where it would be much more effective because everybody else is there, and so it promotes those sorts of things. Yes?
Sir, can you explain about the dreams, the type of dreams a person gets and how the personality is decided?
Dreams. Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm sure that I actually haven't done research on that, so I can't really talk about it. I mean, as you know, Freud and Jung and lots of people have spoken about it. I mean, I think lots of what they said was not true, but I think there's something to what they said, in terms of wish fulfillment and those sorts of things. But I can't answer that because I haven't done the study. But yeah. Yes.
Good morning. Actually, there's a lot of attrition in today's corporate world. In that case, if I want to learn about 50 employees who are employed, how much time, resource, and money should I spend on learning about employees who are going to leave the job anyway by the time I come up with my results?
They're going to leave the job because you said they're going to leave?
Yeah, because high attrition.
Well, if you find the person who is in the right job, they may leave less soon. Like if you find a job that's right for them, yeah. But sure. I mean, it just depends. I mean, I think that's certainly true. If you for some jobs, I mean, if it's a job that doesn't, but there are some jobs, right, high level jobs, where you're paying people a lot of money and they have a lot of responsibility, and in those situations, you really want to have a very good assessment of what they're like. And there is, very strong evidence that personality differentially predicts performance in different domains.
So I can't design spaces for all employees.
Well, there are some things you could do. There are some things. What's interesting is looking at spaces. I haven't done much work on this myself, but there are certain things. There's certain things we can. I always think it's amazing. If I said, okay, your job is to go design a zoo. I want you to design a zoo, and you've got to build a polar bear house. I want you to build the place for the polar bears. You think, okay, I'll do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn all about polar bears. So I really need to know about polar bears if I'm designing the polar bear house, right? That makes a lot of sense, right? But if I say to you, okay, I want you to go design an office space, you get to be able to say, okay, you won't think, wait a minute, I should learn about humans, right? I should learn about the basic psychology and behavior of humans. It's amazing how humans get left out of it. Like architects don't take psychology courses. Interior designers don't take psychology courses. That makes no sense at all. Like we all know. I spend a lot of time sitting in cafes recording where people said, people go, this is the most comfortable place to be, in the corner. Or by a wall. People will sit by a wall. That's where they go in a cafe. They're comfortable because we have eyes here, right? But what do we do with cubicles? We give them spaces that essentially makes them go like this and turn their back to everybody else. But that's not a good thing to do. So there's some basic psychology that just kind of gets neglected in office space, which I think if you have people feeling comfortable and so on, you would have less attrition, you'd have people staying longer, you'd have them being more productive, more engaged. But you can also meet their psychological needs too. I'm talking about identity claims. People want to be known. They want it, and they're happy. So if you can promote that, you can allow them to say, okay, not only am I going to give you a telephone and your stapler, I'm also going to give you a bulletin board. Maybe I'm going to put a bulletin board on the outside of your cubicle. You can pin stuff there if you like. I'm going to promote your ability to create, to meet that psychological need to be known. Because we know people are happier when that happens. We know they're more productive when they can meet that. People, you say, okay, I know these people feel more comfortable when they can meet their emotional needs, when they can put up the photo of their loved one or those sorts of things. I know that, so I know that the extroverts want to be in the middle of the office and the introverts want to be at the edge of the office. Knowing those things can help you create, I believe, a much more effective workforce. We just take some who has not asked question.
You showed us the 5 different traits of personalities,
yes.
Especially. In an organization, there are some group tasks to be performed.
Yeah.
Suppose I have a set of 25 people.
Yeah.
Each 5 members are having one particular trait. So which will be the best grouping amongst them to get optimum or best effective productivity?
Well, everybody has all 5 traits, right? So it's not
5 people, 25 people.
Yeah.
Each 5 are having one particular trait.
No, I'm telling you, everybody has scores in all traits. So that, right, it's not the case that one person has one trait. But first of all, there's one thing. As I said before, we know that conscientiousness predicts performance in virtually every domain. So these people use virtually every domain. So ideally you want the balls behind conscientiousness, but then it would somewhat depend on the nature of the task, right? If you want people to be thinking about new possibilities and options and create, then you want high openness people. If you don't want them to do that, you want them, look, here's what you've got to do, just don't mess around, do it. And you want them low on openness. So it depends on that. If it's important, there's team interaction, then extroversion would be important too. Now, of course, I've just talked about traits, right? There are other ways of understanding personality that are also true, right? So personality traits are what McAdams calls the psychology of the stranger. They're very good first read for behavioral trends. If you really want to know something, you've got to go deeper than that. You've got to look at other things that are important and relevant, things like people's values, their roles, their goals. And if you really want to know who they are, looking at their identity, that's the sort of deepest level. This person's story the person tells that gives their life, the person's a sense of purpose and a sense of who they are. Yes, you have a question?
I understand that everyone scores on all those 5 traits which you discussed, but on an average, a person has a high score on any one of them, right?
You can have high scores on multiple.
Yeah, but you can tell a person is open or extrovert based on those scores.
Somebody could be both high on openness and high on extroversion. They're independent of each other.
Okay, now if an introvert wants to become an extrovert,
I beg your pardon?
an introvert wants to become an extrovert,
Yeah.
how long do you take the time change? Because they say once you do something continuously, consciously, it becomes habit, and then it becomes your creative.
Well, as I said, I think you can very effectively, very rapidly and effectively change the behavior. An introvert can behave like an extrovert. But I don't think, as I said, I don't think an introvert will truly be, because it's biological arousal levels is what it's about. And so I don't think that will ever change. I think it's in your genes. I think it was determined at conception. Sorry?
Upbringing of a person,
Yes.
atmosphere the person got, and all those that impact upon the personality.
Right. I think yes. I think there's sort of biological range. You're born with this genetically, and then I think that your early experiences will also have an impact, which will affect it, and that will maybe make you be in this part of the range or this part of the range. And then once you're there, although you'll change over the course of lifespan, there's only so much you're likely to change. So I think, really, I think trying to genuinely change, I think you can change your behavior. Genuinely trying to change your personality, I don't think is an effective way to do it. The best way is to think, all right, how can I incorporate my personality into my life, or their personality into this job, or whatever it is.
Why is there a change in behavior in one particular person? Say I have a roommate or I have any other friend. The same person would behave in a classroom setup or in an office very differently, whereas in his home or in a private setup would behave very differently. And also there are a particular set of people, if you talk to them and you give them what they want to hear, they instantly like that person. But if something, it's like if something you talk about a reality or a fact, they dislike the person or they don't talk to the person. Why does this happen?
Okay, so I think you asked 2 questions there, right? And I think the first question was similar to your question, right? So we said, sure, people are different in different spaces, they have different roles and so on. The second one was why do people respond differently to
Different people at different times.
You give them something what they want to hear.
Yeah.
You give a person what he wants to hear, they instantly likes you.
Yeah.
Whereas you talk something of a fact or something that is not comfortable or a reality, he may not be that social.
Yeah. I don't really know how to address that question. I don't know why it is there are different personalities. I guess I'm not really sure what you're asking. Can you rephrase it another way?
If I'm talking to you, if you're talking to me, and you talk about something that's very interesting, I'm completely engaged in what you're saying.
Yeah.
Whereas you come with a different thought, you try to address me, and I'm not comfortable with the topic.
Yeah.
So what I think is I will not like to, I will move out.
Okay.
Why does this happen?
Why does it happen? Well, because we have our sense, our own personality and our sense of values. I don't know why we like some people.
So it's like you give a particular person what he likes to hear.
Yeah.
He's very comfortable.
Well, there's certainly there's certain differences. There are certainly personality differences in how open to other people are and open. So, for example. And how people respond to different roles. So, for example, classic cases are things like authoritarian people who are very unpleasant to people below them in the hierarchy and very secret to people above them, and other people don't. That doesn't play such a big role. Also, things like to some people, certain values are more important to them, and those need to be congruent. But I can't really answer your question. I don't really. wrap up or
Yes.
yes, but not time. What am I meant to do now?
Shubham, you just
The lovely questions that we had there, I'm sure Professor Sam Gosling found them interesting. Thank you, sir. The human mind is a fascinating maze of all kinds of thoughts, feelings, expressions till they come to us. Understanding it is an even more difficult task. Today we've had the opportunity to listen to Professor Sam Gosling, who's shared his experiences on the subject area, especially learning spaces to understand the human mind in a better way. The session was really engrossing, and I'm sure it must have put many of us to think what we do, why we do, and how we do it. I'd like to thank you, Professor Sam, for sharing your rich and valued experiences in terms of your research. You got to see a lot of it, and the subject area. I take this opportunity to thank you and wish you all the very best. I'd like to also thank the students and the faculty of GIM for coming here and gracing the occasion. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now I request